A woman's sexual timeline is like the career of an NFL running back. If you look at NFL running backs, they're very good in their prime from like their late teens and their early 20s. Their college years is really a running back's prime in football. And they can get a little better at certain things up through their mid 20s. But I mean, even you get like 22, 23, it's hard to get faster as a running back. It's hard to get more athletic at like 22, 23. You can get stronger, but then you get like 23, 24, 25, and you're not really getting faster. You're not really getting quicker. You're not really getting more agile. You can get smarter at the game. You can improve your mechanics and your footwork, but in terms of pure athleticism as a running back, you're not really getting better through your 20s. It's going to be late teens, early 20s, and kind of holding steady through mid 20s, and then there's a decline till about 30. And the thing with running backs is people always say, once the running back hits 30, then the career is usually over, and that tends to be the case. There's always those running backs that are pretty elite into their 30s. Sometimes they're late 30s, but that's very rare. And a woman's sexual timeline goes hand in hand with NFL running backs. It's very similar. I did a video on this where I describe a woman's prime years as 18 to 22. She's declining 23 and 24, but she's kind of in this denial phase of declining. She still thinks she's got it at 23 and 24, but she's still kind of in decline, just doesn't realize it yet. And then I said 25 to 29 is kind of her epiphany phase where she realizes it, and I called 30 the wall. Now, we can argue with that. 30 is a little bit generous. You could say 25 is the wall, but the epiphany phase and the wall are kind of similar. The epiphany phase, she's in decline during the epiphany phase, but she's realizing it. And then the wall is like the moment of no return. But they're both kind of hand in hand. You could say 25 is a woman's wall. You could say 30 is a woman's wall. I'm going to be a little bit generous, and I'll say 30 is the wall. And I'll just say 18 to 22 is prime. 23, 24 is like the denial phase of she's in denial that she's like on the decline. And then 25 to 29 is that epiphany phase of, oh shit, I better find somebody, or I got to take advantage of my youth, my fertility while I still have it, kids, marriage, and all of that. So you look at the timeline of an NFL running back, women are very similar. You wouldn't take an NFL running back at like 28 and give them a long-term contract. So when it comes to women, it's very similar. Be careful of a woman that you're giving a long-term contract. Every day after she turns 18, every year after that, she loses leverage in terms of commitment. And people say, well, why is it different for the guy and the girl? Well, it depends on the dynamics between the two, but in general, a woman that's feminine is going to look for a masculine guy in terms of being able to provide physical masculinity, financial masculinity. So if the guy's being judged on looks and money and resources, he needs time to get going. So he might not get to a certain place in his life until a little bit later to be that like alpha masculine provider type that she's looking for. But the problem with that is, in terms of her fertility, in terms of what she can provide in terms of looks and physicality, she's on the decline a lot earlier than the man is, because men and women are judged differently when it comes to long-term relationships and children and commitment, because biologically we're just wired differently. So when you look at the NFL running back and the woman, her sexual timeline goes pretty much hand in hand with an NFL running back. The college years of the NFL running back is like his prime years. It's going to be the 18 to 22. That's when a running back is elite. And then the running back is going to taper off a little bit, like 23, 24. 25 is going to start that epiphany phase where the realization of decline, like 25 to 29 is that decline, and 30 is the wall. Most NFL running backs are out of the league by 30. Some of them, they do go into their 30s, but that's not usually the case. When a running back is really about like athleticism and moving through the defenses and quickness and ability to juke out an opponent, it's a lot of strength and athleticism, and they're getting hit by linebackers and safeties and cornerbacks, defensive linemen all the time. So physically too, they just don't hold up like other positions in football. So women follow that same timeline. You wouldn't take an NFL running back at 30 and sign them for 5 years. You wouldn't take an NFL running back at 28 and sign them for 5 years. Even at 25, NFL running backs like can do it. Like some of the top elite guys, they'll be in their mid-20s, 25, 26, and they'll get another extension for a long-term deal. But you start getting past 25, 26, I mean, now you're getting into 27, 28, 29. It's the general managers know, coaches know, and so the NFL running backs, they're going to get the bulk of their money and their long-term deals in their early to their mid-20s, because for that position, it's just kind of downhill. So you wouldn't give the NFL running back this long-term deal when he's like 30 or 28, 27. So be careful with women, because it's kind of on a similar timeline. And you might think that, oh, well, you found the one, or you found the unicorn, but you got to understand where she is on her biological clock. It's different at 18 than it is at 28. So you have to understand how that changes her demeanor, how that changes her mood, how that changes what she's looking for. You don't want to be the guy that's just saving a girl at the end of her party years, at the end of her having fun, just like, oh shit, I need to find somebody, and you're just the chump that's going to do it. And it's not to say that the women are just these like gold diggers that are going to look for that, and men are these shining creatures. No, it's not that at all, but it's just biologically the roles are different. Spiritually, the roles are different. So understand that as a man, what you're getting yourself into. Understand what you're committing to long term. If a woman is not willing to give you that long-term commitment in her early 20s, her late teens or early 20s, you got to question that when she's now looking for commitment in her mid-20s, late 20s, early 30s, and God forbid, mid-30s and on. And it's not to say that you can't, or that like a woman doesn't deserve love or doesn't deserve commitment or anything, but it's like, you got to understand what you're doing as a man. You got to understand your value. You got to understand your market value, your sexual market value. You can't you got to have a standard for yourself. You can't just be the guy, especially in this economy with the exponential population, with competition being the way it is, where a man just like needs time in this economy to get going. He might not be at like a stable place until his 30s. A lot of people in my generation now, they're staying at home with their parents until their early 30s, mid 30s, and no, it's not embarrassing. Times are hard. It's hard to make yourself into something out here. It's hard to get going. So if you can stay home as long as you can to save money or do whatever, do that. But understand that as you've been working, and maybe this girl's not seeing something in you, or she rejected you, or she's not going the distance with you, she's not spending the time with you when you're an entry-level worker, but now you're a manager, or now you own a business in your 30s, and now you have all these options. Don't just think that like you owe someone commitment now. You have the ability now as a man to really understand who you're committing to long-term, who you're sharing your assets with. If they're not in the court dribbling with you, practicing with you, you know, it's hard to give them long-term commitment just because you're in the game now, just because you've made the pros. You know, they're not in the court practicing. They're not on the field with you practicing. They're not with you when you're an entry-level worker. They're not with you when you're a middle school athlete. They're not with you when you're a high school athlete, a college athlete. They're not with you when you're going up through the ranks. But now that you're a pro athlete, now they're with you and they want the long-term commitment. You got to be careful of that. So the timeline of this, with women and their sexual strategy and their sexual timeline, it's going to be very similar to an NFL running back. And if you're familiar with the NFL, you're going to get exactly what I'm saying. And if you're not familiar with the NFL, just look up running backs, look up the timeline of how running backs age and the careers of running backs in the NFL. They're going to be at their elite prime in their late teens and their early 20s, and then they're going to taper off a little bit through their mid 20s. And even though they can improve footwork and skills in terms of knowledge of the game, they can get smarter. I mean, you can get smarter as a running back until you're 60. I mean, you can always get smarter, but physically and you being able to stay in the NFL, it's going to be late teens, early 20s is when you're going to get the prime, the bulk of your money up through like the mid 20s. And even as a running back at 25, you're not really going to get faster. You're not going to get more athletic. You can maintain a little bit. You can work on your footwork, your agility. You can read defenses better. You just have more experience in the league. But an NFL running back is not getting better really after like 24, 25. Better, you know, like I said, better in terms of understanding the game, smarter. But no franchise is giving an NFL running back a long-term commitment mid-20s and on. It just doesn't happen. Sometimes it does. There's always the exceptions. There's always the outliers. So yeah, there's like the Marshawn Lynch that can go into his 30s and be elite, but that is very rare. And that's just not how NFL running backs usually age, and that's not how they usually progress through the league. So you got to understand that with women, they age very similarly to that. They're very much in line with the career of an NFL running back. So understand what it means to have a woman in her sexual prime when she has all the options available to her. She has all the options available to her and she chooses you. it means a little bit more when she's like 18 to 22 rather than she's 35 and she can only have a kid for this last like year or two, or so like she has to find somebody, so you're just like the guy who's willing. Got to be careful of that. So it's not to say that one gender is better than the other. It's not to say that women are just like these creatures that take advantage and men are the shining good people. It's just a biological reality of how timelines match up. And women have that clock, men don't have that clock. So as a man, understand what you're getting yourself into.